Hello folks, we are going to mix some metal drums today. So, let me play a song, unmixed one. It's a work in progress and it's not going to win any awards like this, but we are going to make it better. But first, a few words about top-down mixing. So, long time ago, people used analog consoles, so there were volumes, there were EQs. Sometimes they were famous enough to be able to afford a compressor, but that's about it. Yeah, that was easier at the times. Now it's really more complex because the music now is so like brutal, punchy, loud, big. So there's a lot of processing on the master track. Now, if you would mix the old-fashioned way, starting from the mics and going upwards, so to speak, then you would face a quite a big challenge because you would have to imagine how the thing would sound when it's all so processed with all the compressors or anything that's on the master track. So that's one reason we are doing it the other way around. And the second reason is there are elements in the mix like kick and snare drum, which need to cut through the mix at all times. So you could do it by some complicated sidechaining, or you can make things much easier for yourself. Just increase the level of the kick and snare, and then let the compressor on the master bus do the magic. What it will do is it will follow the brutal peaks of the kicks and snare and lower the levels. But since it has been already mixed, it would also lower the level of the mix itself. So the relative levels of the kick and snare versus the rest of it will stay intact and the kick and snare will cut through. Now, how does it work in practice? I have a master track here and this is what's inside it. A fairly brutal compressor, a fairly brutal multi-band compressor, and some not so important stuff. And all drums are also mixed into the drum master, which will also contain another set of compressors inside the MDrumStrip. So first let me play a little bit of this song without the master at all. Now that's quite a difference, and then just the master. So next, I'm going to add MDrumStrip. Select the device master. Let it analyze. That's even bigger difference. Okay, so without anything. So the difference is huge, and it's just the master stuff that will stay there pretty much intact all the time. Now, truth to be told, I'm actually using sample drums, so my life is a little bit easier because there's no leakage between the mics. But yeah, I will talk about it as well. So I'm going to start with snare drum. So I'm going to solo snare drum. And I also need to solo the voice, otherwise you wouldn't hear me. Now, let's play a little bit of the snare drum, which is here. And copy and drum strip. Select snare drum. And it already sounds better, but still. So first analyze the input. And set the fundamental using this or this, which is a bit easier, to the fundamental, which is usually the highest peak, usually. So this is it. Now with and without. So I would say that's quite an improvement, and this is just the default. So now what I'm going to do is take care of the EQ. Now, there are lots of controls, but usually you don't need almost any of them except for these two rows. These are the special EQ bands we kind of defined for the snare drum by analyzing lots of snare drums. And what I usually do is just enable and disable one to see if it's better or it's worse, and potentially play with the gain. So more of the band, less of the band. So let's try. So this is a definite no-no. So the body usually makes the drum kind of bigger. It contains really the body of the drum. If the snare drum sounds kind of like trebly and without some punch, I would say, then use the body. Now the harmonics are usually useful to sort of improve the body itself by giving it some further harmonics. So let's see. Yeah, I like this one. Not this one. Ring, despite its name ring, is usually useful to make the snare kind of like more natural, because without it, it kind of sounds artificial somehow. I guess if you remove ringing from the snare drum, I don't know. See what I mean? And the air is pretty self-explanatory. Now, at this point, I kind of want to make the drums sound fairly even. So containing full bass spectrum and full high spectrum. We can change it later in the mastering section. For example, some bands tend to make the drums a little bit dull, I would say. I like them trebly, so that's everyone's choice. Now, I quite like this, but so oftentimes people go into the studio with a bad drum, not a new head, not tuned well, not treated well. I mean, if you put a duct tape on it, there's a reason for it. And if you don't do all that, you might have some really like pinching frequencies in there. I don't have any, just because it's a good drum and well recorded. But if you would have, then what you do is enable razor kill, and this controls the frequency. You may be able to see it on the analyzer, but usually you don't. So just increase the gain and sweep until you really hear the ugly frequency, the ugliness. When it starts hurting, then it's the right frequency. Hear this? Now let's remove it by putting the gain down. Huh. So in a way, this is actually good. Yeah. I didn't know about it, but okay. but it's a little too tame. Yeah, I'm going to keep it. Expect that one. Okay. Now, next part, dynamics. So usually when processing drums in general, but mainly the snare drum, you would use a compressor and use it pretty hard, and then use the attack stage to kind of let the transient go. But it's really fiddly and sometimes just doesn't really work that way. So what we came up with is a kind of new idea where you have three parallel compressors, not always compressors. Some of them are more complex than that. And you can mix them using the XY pad. So what I'm going to do is just move the XY pad, and first I will play you the individual mics. So if I put it up here to the pop, and you can see the mix for the pop is on top, and compressor and squash is at minimum, so we can basically just hear the pop. And to hear it even better, I'm going to remove the further modules. And now let's see. See the initial transient, like really punchy. It's like a classic compression. And this is really overcompressed. Okay. And this is all of them. And I can just put it anywhere I want to highlight certain character. So since this is a metal song, I'm going to go a little bit towards the pop and not towards the squash. Why? Because in the metal you really need the transient to cut through the mix, which is usually like really dense with all the guitars and stuff. But if this would be a pop, for example, then I would go more like this way. So, okay, let's see. These things underneath, you can use to tweak the individual, let's call it compressors. But rarely you need it. I actually never needed it, but so far. But what you may use is these two. So the depth obviously controls how much compression you actually get. So it's kind of like a dry wet between the processed and not compressed at all. So let's see. This is metal, so I'm going to go full in. Now compending. Compending is a special thing which basically does compression before the compression and then inverts the compression afterwards. What is this for, right? So oftentimes you have a drummer who plays really dynamically. Lots of silent hits, lots of loud hits, but you want the hits to sound kind of the same. So normally the compressors are like processing the loud hits mostly. But that means that the silent hits will be kinda different to the loud hits if processed a lot. Compending does taming the loud hits down so they are in a similar level as the silent hits. So that the real compression part does kind of a similar job. And then inverts it so the dynamics stay there. So there are loud hits, there are silent hits, but they are all kind of processed in a similar fashion. In our case, I cannot really show you because all of the hits are loud, so yeah, sorry. Combining can actually change the character of the compression, obviously. So let me show you at least that. It almost seems like it compresses even more than before. Now, let's try without the dynamics and with it. So it may seem overprocessed, especially if you are not used to metal. But in the context of the mix, that's personally my preference. Now, reverb. Let's see first without it. I mean, you don't need much, but I have not, right? So I would probably give it a little less. Now the reverb will probably kind of disappear in the full mix. But this is what makes a difference between like a mediocre mix and a good mix. Now, there are several different models, usually um, sorted from the smallest to the biggest. So I can try a few different ones. Usually I like the plate 1, especially for metal. Now if you have leakage from other drums, especially like cymbals, which I don't have because it's sampled, then you will just enable these two. Now you can tweak these, but usually the defaults just do work. Now, what we didn't talk about it is this part. So first, there is this thing called fattener, which here absolutely sucks. But usually if we have like a really badly recorded drum, which somehow doesn't have any life, and it's missing treble or is missing body or anything, and you can try just enabling it, perhaps just a little bit. As a side effect, it's really stereophonic, but the most important part of it is that it just replenishes the missing frequencies. I mean, I could use it, but no, no need. Now, there's maximizer, saturator, and output, which all of them kind of do the same thing. They control the output level of the drum, just different way. So they are sorted in the usual order, but you can actually, if you didn't notice, you can change the order of anything. So if you want to be experimental, then you can. I mean, you can put a saturator before the EQ. I don't know. But what they do in general is maximizer is basically just a maximizer, a limiter. So you can increase the drive and make it louder, like this. Same thing for the saturator, which kind of works the same way, just saturating. Its effect is usually much less prominent, but it is important. In most cases, the devices are set up in such a way that you don't really need to touch any of this, but you may. So for example, if I put the entire mix together and the snare kinda doesn't cut through, then what I would do is try these 3 controls, and we'll see. Okay, so let's go to the bass drum. I'm just copying the drum strip there, following it. Now I will select the bass drum. Now I can probably play the same part. Obviously, auto input. Yeah. Without it. Now, my bad. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing I did before. So first, set the fundamental. Now, with kick drums, the fundamental may be a little tricky to set up because, you know, look at it. I probably like it here. I usually follow my ears. For me, it's either here or here. This is too high, it's obviously in harmonic. Considering how it looks, it's probably this, but hard to say. So now I'm going to, yeah, I can start with the metal preset instead. Okay. Now, oftentimes you want to remove some low frequencies from the kick drum. May seem counterintuitive, but especially in metal, when there are so many hits, it can really clutter the mix. And also, it may not let the bass guitar come through. So, I can try. I actually like that. Also, there's a high pass filter for that, but yeah. Now let's see about the rest of them. These are the harmonics as usual. You can see the actual location here, by the way. Now, the second harmonics usually in metal kind of provides the bottom for the kick drum. Since we cannot use the sub, because it would clutter a mix, we can use this one. Now, I didn't talk about the advanced parameters of the EQ yet, so maybe it's the time, I guess. So the shift, it moves the frequency of each individual band. Bandwidth is like a Q. Usually the D4s will just do. They are set up in order to make usual drum sound good. Now, what may be more interesting is the dynamics feature. Now, all of these bands are actually potentially dynamic. Now, if you set it to off, it's minimum, then they are not dynamic at all. Now they are completely dynamic. I mean, this band. What this means is that the band actually takes effect and processes the signal only if there actually is some signal, meaning that the bass drum has actually been played. You might ask why. Now, the usual case is you have a drum with a long sustain. Most of them do. But you actually want to amplify or attenuate some frequencies only in the initial, not really transient, but the initial big bang of the drum, I would say. So that calls for the dynamic. It doesn't change the character of the mic overall, but it alters the actual hit. So let's go for the harmonics. No, flattering. Now the mid part is what you usually remove. Let's write this down. So let's see. Yes, see that ugly mid-range. Now with metal, I can often go even lower just to clean the mids. And here we can hear the difference. Now, the mid-band is not dynamic by default for a reason. The thing is, the mid-range of the bass drum mic is cluttering the thing all the time, not only if the drum is actually played. So we can hear it by hear it right now. We can hear the mid-range mess in between the hits. Now, slap A and slap B. This is what we really need to focus in the metal, not so much in the pop. And so let's see what they do. It's just fine by me. No need for reso kill, no need for these things now because sampled. And the dynamics, same idea as before. So let's see the different ones. So usually what works for metal is somewhere around here. And a reverb for the kick drum. Yeah, again, same thing. Without it, it would work, but with it, just a little mojo in there, you know. Okay. I'm just going to leave the default. Let's go for the toms. I will first copy the drum strip to the tom group and set it up. And then I will go the toms one by one. So first I'm going to solo tom 1, which is here. You can see here. Now when it comes to the routing, even on non-reverb, all the toms are mixed into the toms group, and then there are individual mics, and they are mixed into the drums group, and then it's all mixed into the master. So, tom 1, I'm going to select tom and analyze and set the fundamental and try each band. I will try the preset. Here I'm also going to use a gate. Now, why would I use a gate since there is no bleed? Well, because with toms, it's quite a usual case that a well-tuned tom has a really long sustain. Too long. Especially with toms when there can be quite a chain gun of toms. So, let's see. Yeah, that's all we need. Now, also when it comes to the gating of toms. If you imagine the position of the mics placed on the toms, the problem is they are so close to the cymbals, and they are also kind of aimed at the snare drum. So the toms usually get a lot of bleed. So in practice, unfortunately, it's quite a usual case that you need to kind of gate them manually, meaning you will just edit the waveforms themselves and remove everything in between the hits. Yeah, it works better than the gate usually. Now this is fine for the tom 1, and I can see this is a nice break featuring all toms almost. So let's go to tom 2. Now the good thing is that usually the toms, if they are from one kit, they usually have the same characteristics. So now I probably won't need to touch this at all, or at least not much. Let's see. That's fine by me. Now there's no third tom, unfortunately, so I will just skip it and go to the floor toms. Okay. Little moving. Now, same as kick drum, the spectrum can be quite misleading when it comes to the floor toms. They're just so low. But it seems to work. But with floor toms, we usually need to access this cube or something. Doesn't do anything. And the second floor tom. I guess this kind of works. Okay, and that leaves us with the third tom, which is here. So again, I'm going to solo width. And let's play all of the toms. And got the tom bus analyze. Now the floor toms are a little That sounds okay. Good news. This was the hard part. The rest of it is quite easy. So let's go with the hi-hat. We need to find somewhere where the hi-hat is actually played. Really open hi-hat. Ah, here. Beautiful. And as usual, I'm going to use hi-hat device. And usually that's all I do. I just go with the metal preset. Overhead. Now let's play some more little bar. And use device overhead. And a preset. So what it does here, interestingly, is enabling the symbol kill. What a symbol kill is, it's kind of like gate, but only for high frequencies. It's actually a dynamic band. Now, why would I want to remove symbols? Well, I'm not removing it. I'm just making it a little less prominent. So let's see what would happen without it and with it. I'm removing the symbols so that more of the drums, mainly the snare drum, can come through and get this ambient feel. Because when it comes to the metal music, the cymbals and hi-hats are actually usually kind of in the background, but the kick and snare just have to come through. So this is why. Next, rooms, absolutely the same thing. I'm just going to clone it and use a room. Again, removing a little bit of the symbols. Obviously, we can play with all of these things, mainly with the reverb and dynamics, but I'm just happy with that usually. This one is going to be more interesting because it actually is monophonic. I like it. So, in order to make it stereophonic, I'm just going to use a reverb on it. That works for me. Now, this is basically it except for the parallel, which we'll get to in a second. But now we can technically play all of the drums. Now, most of these devices actually set the levels properly so that the output loudness is actually kind of right for modern music. But sometimes I can see I already changed the toms, which we should test on some break. But we could also change the rooms. Better, almost at the default. Now, when it comes to the overheads rooms, then sometimes you just need to change the levels. I already removed the room 2 because it was just too prominent for how it's ambient. Now, Many modern metal records almost seem to not have any ambience, just almost no rooms. Personally, I don't like it. It's more into your face, and if the metal is too like cluttered, then I guess it makes some sense, but I like rooms, at least a little. So what you usually do is the classic thing, put it all down and just increase it until you stop liking it. So the 0 dB FS is ideal for me, which means the drum strip actually set it up the way I like it. I would remove a little, yes. Kind of like ideal for me. You can hear the second room when there are no drums, so it fills the space between the hits, but normally it's not really like prominent. It's good for my taste. Now, the last thing in the chain is the parallel bus. I will clone the MDrumStrip again and use a device parallel. And first thing, I'm going to send most of the drums in there. So here, the snare drum and toms. I sent toms, yeah, but a little less. And of course, overheads and rooms as well. We'll see about the levels later. Definitely less of the second room. Now, let's solo it. There are several weird presets. So the parallel thing, it sucks. It should suck. It sounds bad, but we will mix just a little bit of it so that it fills the space in between the hits. Now, how can it fill the space between the hits when it's just containing the hits themselves? That's because it's so overcompressed. And you can make it even more brutal. As you can see, the maximizer is at the maximum. Maximizer at maximum. Anyway, let's try. That's too much, way too much. Yep, that's fine by me. And finally, you need to let the master instance analyze. Oh, it changed. So this is the final. Forgot. Now, this is brutal. You may not like it brutal. If that's your case, now it's less brutal. You can also disable the individual compressors. But it's weak now. Yeah, that's kind of how I like it. Now, let's check the whole mix, I guess. Yeah, not playing because I have muted it. So it was a quick mix, most talking than mixing, but it kind of does the trick. Now, let's hear how it sounds before and after. So first, I'm going to play completely dry, then I will add the master thing, then I will add the rest of it. Great, I'm happy with that, relatively, considering how quickly I made it. Now, you noticed I play with the rooms here as well. That's because in the context of the mix, full mix, the rooms may be hidden more than when playing just the drums solo. So oftentimes when you mix the drums themselves without the rest of it, then afterwards you need to increase the rooms or not, depending what you really want. So yeah, that's about it for the metal drum mixing. Thanks for watching.